it's Natasha Edwina. Welcome to the Oasis of Awareness, where we dive deep into systemic change through positivity, pleasure, playfulness, and partnership. And today I am partnering with my dear friend and longtime colleague, Jillian Chesley, who is a Bowen family systems therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we are going to talk about systemic and relationship dynamics in the face of massive stress. So here we are. Jillian, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so we'd like to start on, how we met and how we know each other. So I'll start off. You can add in any little bits. We met when we attended graduate school together back in 2002. We both moved to San Diego to go to Alliant International University. I think we both applied to the California School of Professional Psychology, but then got accepted to Alliant because they switched names that year. And I don't think either one of us had any idea what we were getting into at that time. We were just little spring chickens. And one thing I do remember, and I remember in one of our classes, one of the first classes that we took, the professor saying, if you are in a relationship now, your relationship will either end or transform at the end of this 2-year program. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah. So anything that you want to add as far as how we met, what that program did for you personally, or, I know you were doing some personal development in your life before you went to that program.
Mm-hmm. I've been doing, I was in my early 30s when I went to graduate school, and I had done a lot of therapy, gotten a lot of therapy myself, and I still get a lot of therapy if I need it. And I had just kind of been diving very deeply into a lot of ways of healing thyself, if you will. And I really got intrigued by the field of marriage and family therapy, because I hadn't really, even though I had been to many marriage and family therapists, I hadn't really realized what that meant. Like, what was the difference between that and a psychologist or psychiatrist? And, discovering the whole idea of systems, right? So family systems was huge for me, and it really put a lot of things into place once I started to look through the lens of family systems in general. And then as my education continued, I just got more and more specific into Bowen family systems. So that was an amazing time that we had. San Diego was amazing. You and I were housemates for a while. That was great. That was a good moment in my life.
Absolutely. I have fond memories as well. Studying on the beach. We used to live right by the bay, and, going to class. I think we both had day classes at that time. I was working at night as a cocktail waitress, and I came into the program also. I was talked into the program because really why I was coming to Alliant was psychophysiology and biofeedback. So I was really interested in the holistic connections of things. And so that was sort of the systems orientation that I was coming from. And I had already been working in social services for 3 years. So I wasn't so excited about becoming a therapist because I already knew that I was going to have what I was going to work with. I was already working with CPS cases and that extreme stress and whatnot. And I kind of wanted to move more into the body and more into the overall health conversation. But of course, the universe knew what was best for me and put me into that marriage and family therapy program. And so understanding systems theory at that academic level was so valuable. Like, I think back, I'm so grateful because it's helped me so much personally, of course, professionally. And I no longer I never did work as a marriage therapist. I did do some marriage therapy along with family therapy, but I mainly worked in individual and family therapy, mostly with kids for most of my career. Again, that sort of just happened. But now I don't do much therapy at all. I'm more into coaching and consulting and looking at the overall dynamics of everything. And so that systems knowledge of how we operate was hammered into us that first year, because that first year, I remember everything was about ourselves, like reflecting on ourselves. What is our what does our family of origin look like? What was our family of origin doing? And going through all those theoretical concepts and then doing our own genogram. Do you want to explain to everybody what a genogram is? I think you could probably say it better than me.
Genogram, or actually what Bowen first called it, was a family diagram. It got moved to called a genogram, but it's essentially a family tree like any other family tree. However, along with just the facts about the family, things like relationships are put into it. So you draw different lines if two people consider themselves close, or if they consider themselves more distant. It's essentially a visual diagram of at least 3 generations of families, of your family, and what the relationships are like at that moment. And interestingly enough, we have relationships with people who have already passed. So that's part of it as well. One of the main concepts in Bowen theory is intergenerational transmission of anxiety. And that's what that really is about, is the idea that whatever went on in previous generations gets emotionally, positively and negatively, gets emotionally passed down to the next generation and the next generation and so on. So that's my starting point with all my clients. I do a family diagram with them, and sometimes they'll get very interested. I've been doing family diagram, family research, did a trip to the East Coast in 2008. I think it's really impossible for us to know who we are until we really try to understand as much as we possibly can about what came before us. I'm very passionate about that. That's one of the huge pieces for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's super exciting about that is, as you said, and I also trained in Bowen Family Systems Theory. So just to give all the listeners out there, and some of them might be therapists that went through a similar program as us, you get an exposure to all these different systems theories. There's several different ways of working, and then you get exposure to things like cognitive behavioral therapy, and they pressure you, I say pressure, but they ask you to, in your second year, because I felt the pressure, to choose a theory to operate from, so that you can get really good at that one theory. I never could choose. I just couldn't. Finally, I chose integrative, because there were certain theories that I gravitated more towards. Interestingly enough, Bowen theory is one, and so it was postmodernism, which is sort of, it almost seems at odds, in the theoretical interpretation, but they do fit together because they're both addressing culture and what's going on outside of us. So those are probably 2 of my main operating theories. So I'm still integrative, and I did do 2 years of advanced training and supervision in Bowen Family Systems Theory after I graduated. So Jillian and I have shared that passion and that love of this work. She's definitely has a lot more experience in it than I do, and a lot more supervision in it. She's still getting supervision to keep herself.
Or coaching.
Yeah. That I shouldn't say supervision. Yeah, coaching. So it's basically she's working with some of the folks that developed the theory and were very big in growing it as her coach. So she's really connected to the heart of how this all started. And what's really interesting for me is looking back, okay, how long has it been? Almost 20 years, 18 years since we started graduate school, right?
Oh boy.
I know. Hey, but we both look like we're still in our early 30s, right? So that's okay. So yeah, when I think about that, there was no mention in graduate school or in my training in Bowen Family Systems Theory of spirituality or of epigenetics or any of that now. And so now, almost 20 years later, I'm diving into those topics very deeply in my PhD program, right, in mind-body medicine. And so I can see now how the epigenetic science has caught up, and we can tell that there's genetic markers from trauma. You're talking about intergenerational transition.
Oh, yeah.
And now the science is proving it. Bowen knew this way back when, and he was a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and he said that all organisms, from cells to ants to cats to humans, operate in predictable patterns, depending on the amount of anxiety, he calls it, but I would say also emotional energy. And so you also mentioned that when people pass away, we still have a relationship tie with them. And again, that's energy. you know. So I love how he spoke in the language of energy. And so when I talk about spirituality, it's, you know, the body dies, but the energy is still there. So you can refer to that as a spiritual process if you're a spiritual person, or if you're a straight hardcore scientist, atheist, whatever, you can refer to that through Bowen's, maybe some of Bowen's scientific work, right? It doesn't matter.
No, and I mean, he did base the theory off of biology and evolution. He was saying, you know, the criticism at the time of the individual psychology that was going on. This was mostly the 50s and 60s. He started in the 1940s, but was, you know, we can't measure this. A lot of the psychologists who came before him were what they call armchair psychologists, right? There was no studies done. There was no observation done. So he really, and he had himself been through psychoanalysis and found that he felt there was pieces missing. He felt that it wasn't as helpful as he thought it would be. So he started looking to biology and to science in order to try to explain this human phenomenon of why humans do what they do. And, you know, it actually goes beyond culture. There's been a lot of studying in other mammals, specifically other mammals that are social beings, apes, for example, and all of the 8 concepts. So Bowen theory has 8 concepts, and those 8 concepts explain all human behavior. It doesn't matter what culture you're from, because, for instance, one of the 8 main concepts is sibling position, right? So in families, of course, the relationships with the siblings look different, but in every family, through doing the family diagram work and through an individual studying their own family and applying these concepts, they can see that there are patterns in all families with sibling relationships. Stereotypically, there's an older sibling. In fact, I remember I am a younger sibling. Natasha is an older sibling. And what is funny, even though I think you're 8 years younger than me, something like that, or 6 years, something like that.
8 years, yeah.
Yeah, we developed for a minute. There was a little bit of conflict, a little bit of stress between our animals. And all of a sudden, Natasha's oldest sibling and my younger sibling came out. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's so interesting, you know, and that's kind of what Bowen theory is talking about, in the sense that, you know, even though we all see these differences with everyone, and no patterns, right? Mm-hmm. If we put on a lens, in fact, everything on this earth operates as a system, except for one thing: how humans think. Because of our primitive brain and our frontal lobe and the connections, and how we've kind of been linear thought process, and that has been a survival tool. We needed that in order to survive, and it's gotten us really far. It's gotten the hard sciences down, and it's gotten a lot of things down. But the bottom line is, kind of the missing piece is, humans don't think systemically. We think linearly. So that's part of it. So I have been attempting to think systemically about myself, about my own personal relationships, about my clients' relationships, and as one of the reasons why we're doing this today, at a societal level, I see all around us what's going on is a systemic problem. It's not, you know, everything's polarized right now, but that's actually a systemic problem.
Absolutely. And as I'm listening to you, I'm getting so excited, because I can imagine 5 more YouTube episodes on like these different things that you're talking about, because it's so relevant. I've never been so energized about Bowen family systems theory as I have been this year, because we've just reached this fever pitch of anxiety. But before we dive deeper into that societal thing, I wanted to bring up a couple things that relate to some things that you shared. And one of them is, when you're talking about animal behavior and how, you know, this happens with animals, there's a really interesting bit of research in Deepak Chopra's book, Super Genes. I don't know if you've read it, but I think you would really like it because it does talk about the systems theory of our bacteria and the biology and our gut and the gut-brain connection.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, and then spirituality and how that connects. And so one of the interesting studies that he brings up in that book is that they took chimpanzees, I think it was chimpanzees, you brought up apes, and had them, the first generation born in captivity, they taught them tools. They taught them how to use new tools and develop new skills. And they had some tagged in the wild. And the animals tagged in the wild developed the same skills. Somehow that transmitted, so he's talking about this energetic, it's an energetic process.
Interesting.
Of even learning. And so the way that I like to, and then here now we might dip into, or this could dip into Carl Jung and his idea of the collective unconscious. And I like to describe it, so much easier to describe it now because I say it's like we all share the same iCloud account and we can upload things and then download things. And that was sort of how the collective unconscious worked, right? So I wonder about how that fits in, but either way, it's still energy. And so I get really curious about this energy floating around, and how it's contributing to our relationships in our society. Second point, again, before we dive in deeper, is when we're talking about the systems thinking, the systems theory. I'm also very big on bringing awareness to the divine feminine, right? So it's this idea of this more receptive energy, this holistic circular thinking, as opposed to that analytical, linear type thinking, and how we need probably both. Those need to be in balance. But our world, as you mentioned, has been a very linear thinking type of world. And so the way that in my circle, or how I might describe that, is there hasn't been enough space for the divine feminine, right? And so how can we create more space for that? And then another point is the second order, we'll say second order change. So the systemic changes. So for instance, right now we're all being told to wear masks and to wash our hands and to do all these things and stay at home so you don't spread this virus. But is anybody thinking about what then? What after 3 months of unemployment? What after a year of unemployment? What after 2 years while the virus is still being circulated? Is anybody thinking about the second order change or the system repercussions?
I absolutely. I've thought about that.
Yeah. And so some people have predicted, and I think you and I are both, the obvious to us is that the mental health field is going to be exploding. So I'm even, I even thought about letting go of my my therapy license because I'm not really doing traditional therapy work anymore. But then I was like, number one, I work too hard for it. And number two, I might have to go back into duty if things keep, going the way that they're going. And so I'm always going to be involved in the mental health conversation, but, in the trenches as a therapist, I don't know if I'm going to continue to do that in that way. But of course, it's vital work and it will continue.
And actually, Bowen theory isn't necessarily explained best and learned best in the stereotypical therapy session, whether it's individual therapy, couples therapy, or family therapy. It's more about a learning. It's more about, a learning, first of all, of self, and more specifically self in relationship, because humans are social beings and we constantly have this push and pull of self versus relationship. And how do we get clear within our own minds and our own feeling of what that means around any topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were sharing, what I thought of too is a systems thinker will hear the words, like I'm listening to the words that you're sharing, and I'm also listening to what's not said, and I'm also listening to body language, and I'm looking at the emotional process, between you and I, and all of that's happening simultaneously in my brain, right? This is a systems thinker. This is somebody who's either naturally thinks that way or has been trained through, maybe.
I don't know if anyone naturally thinks that way unless they were raised in an environment where everyone was a systems thinker, which
Yeah.
would be cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But there are some personality things like engineers. You have like an engineer brain, and you and I. Well, you were like pretty much a software engineer, weren't you? Like that was.
I was a software trainer, and
Okay.
yes, and my family, speaking of family systems, has a long history of engineers, and my boyfriend is an engineer. So
Well,
yes,
there you go. And
my father.
Yeah, my father too. So we have that in common. It's it's no accident that we came together long ago and actually lived together for a bit too. So yeah, and you have engineers. I feel like they are a systems thinker, but they're also very like analytical in some way.
Systems thinker in the sense of whatever they're applying it to, but as far as relationships go,
Yeah.
unless they're trained, I don't know if you could say that. I mean,
No,
obviously everyone's different, but I don't know if you could say that.
Yes,
Yeah.
the emotional piece that they don't, again, our world doesn't teach or honor so much that emotional piece. And I think engineers are just kind of shove that away, or they don't know how to talk about it. And so in my family too, I feel like we have a lot of engineers and a lot of like psychologist types, or like spiritual types, or helper, counselor types. So it's like these two opposing forces, kind of.
Not by accident. Not by accident.
Not
right?
by accident, absolutely. So it's interesting. It's just one of those things. And so I think Bowen systems theory actually really ties in nicely with mindfulness too, because it's about being an observer.
Oh, sure, for sure.
And noticing the, taking the data, having a scientific mind, interesting, not having a position about it, noticing your own reaction. And so, and that is very hard to do, as you said. And I remember when I first started training in Bowen family systems theory, they said, this is a lifelong process. You don't ever win the game. And I was like, well, why am I doing this? Like, I can't, oldest child, I have to do everything. So, but it was so valuable, but it's always continual work. And that, when I think back to that now, it just reminds me of my humanness, So when I catch myself screaming at my kids, or I catch myself absolutely not handling the amount of stress and pressure, I'm like, oh, there's my humanness again, and here it is. And then I think about, systems theory, and then I start looking at all the things in my environment that helped create that amount of stress, and what can I take care of? What can I control, and what can I not control? And so this is, I think, a place that I'd really like to start right now and veer off and ask you about is, what the heck is going on with everybody wanting to control everybody else right now? That is epidemic proportions. Is like, you have to wear a mask to protect me, or you have to do this, or you have to do this, or you have to vaccinate so I can be healthy. I mean, it's gotten to this very like, it's like it's I don't even know what to say about it. It's baffling to me. I mean, it's not baffling.
It's fear, right?
It's fear, but it's like, I never thought I would
So
see
intense.
in my lifetime get this extreme, where people are losing their common sense or logic and giving away their personal power, giving away their own power, which is your responsibility, and the things that you can do to keep yourself solid, grounded, well in the face of a threat. So I don't know if there's anything that you have to share about that, or any insights pointing back to Bowen family systems theory, and what happens to a family system, whether that's a relationship, a society, when the stress amps up.
Well, when the stress amps up, everyone is going to be less in their frontal lobe, less in their thinking, and more in their fear. I often will say to my clients, sadness and fear. There could be some sadness around this, but fear, and of course, fear and sadness are primary emotions. Hurt is a primary emotion, whereas anger is a secondary emotion. But anger has power and control in it, and fear and sadness and pain don't. They're very powerless in a sense. They're vulnerable, right? So when people get enough fear, first of all, when we're totally in our primitive brain, we're not using our frontal lobe at all, there's only two choices. Yes, no, black, white, right? Those are the only two choices when we're in our primitive brain. If we can calm our primitive brain, which is really challenging right now, if we can calm our brain, then we can start to see the gray areas. We can start to kind of have a conversation with ourselves or with those close to us to really figure out not what we feel about a situation, but what we think about a situation. It's once again kind of trying to step back and see things, see what's better long-term versus short-term. That's one of one of Bowen's concepts is the societal emotional process. And Bowen talked a lot about how since the end of World War II, we've been in a societal regression. And he talks about some of the reasons being depletion of resources and overpopulation. Also the trauma from World War II had a lot to do with, why we've just kind of kept going down this road. The fear that World War II caused us, that was insane.
Mm-hmm.
So as we go down this road, he talks about the fact that it probably wouldn't come to a head until the middle of this century. And it wouldn't happen until we realize when people are in their primitive brain, they want to relieve the anxiety of the moment, not sit down, think about things, try to be proactive instead of reactive, and think of the future. We, whether it's about, I need money now, or, let's solve this problem now, even though long term, it's probably going to be awful for humans, the environment, for our elderly people and our people who, in the case of the coronavirus, the people who are vulnerable to the virus, right? So as we get more intense and people get more polarized, we have a heightened anxiety within ourselves. And then we're just going to project that and automatically react, whether it's a social media post or if it's a political situation that's going on. We're just going to react to whomever is saying it and kind of put our fear on that person. Mm-hmm. And it gets more intense because anxiety is contagious. Fear is contagious.
100%. Absolutely. And then it adds, I think, to past trauma too, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that when you are in that fight or flight zone of being agitated, whether it's stress or a provocation or some kind of trigger or past trauma got activated, like you're saying, you can't think calmly. You have to think in black or white, because it's like, stop, make it stop, because mm-hmm. you can't take anymore. And so that happens with alternative viewpoints too. You see mm-hmm. something and you automatically just trigger, oh, no, stop. Mm-hmm. Make mm-hmm. it, quiet it down. And you can't even digest the information. You can't even consider the information. And so then, it's just back and forth. And then the other side gets even more heated. And then that mm-hmm. whole bigger process of how we deal with it causes even more stress. So it's this feedback cycle of just mm-hmm. keeping it going. And then you can see why we've been in this continual regression since World War II. It hasn't stopped. Mm-hmm. It amps up a little bit more each year. And now it's sort of hitting this fever pitch. And I remember I've been reviewing Bowen's 8 principles periodically, just like, wow, it's like he's a psychic, because it's so fitting. And I feel like we are in that 8th principle where he said it'll get to a point where it's so intense that it finally just crumbles. Like, we cannot take the shortcut anymore, and we are faced to look at the long-term ramifications, and we have to start over and rebuild something more in harmony with nature.
And how do humans find a way of agreeing with each other on how that is done?
Well, right? Yeah. So that's
a whole other conversation, but
that's why they need you, Jillian. But seriously, like you said, Bowen family theory, it's an educational process. It's not like your traditional therapy or your coddling or your hand holding or anything like that.
Over empathetic. It's not about that. Yeah.
About the scientific and understanding this stuff and applying it to your life mm-hmm. and seeing what you can do. And so I've been thinking about this. I'll just say where I'm at with this whole coronavirus thing. First of all, I've been deeply researching and studying the immune system for 13 years. Since I became a mom, because then it became urgent for me to know how to keep my babies well, right? And I've always,
not to mention you, Mom.
And me and health. And so, like Bowen theory and all these other things that I'm involved with, the whole concept is take care of yourself. put your oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can help others. So I had to learn that the hard way after 2 years of being a mom. And I'm like, this is not sustainable. Like, I cannot make my life about my children because I'm already burnt out. And so, having to say no to them more and starting to prioritize myself, eat first before I, feed them. Sometimes if you're a breastfeeding mother, like the milk won't come unless you've had something to eat or drink. It's a pretty simple concept, but we get so caught up with all this pressure to be a good mom and do this for your kids and helicopter over them and all of this. But I've done the deep dive into researching wellness and the immune system. So I learned a long time ago how to keep my immune system and my children's immune system optimally well. So I'll say my son turned 10 last week and he has never seen a doctor for an illness. He's never needed to. He's a healthy little dude because we embody those principles. And what I've learned, I've integrated it into my life, right? And it's not to say that he won't ever, but we've done I've had 10 years of my own little research project here that this is working. And so now we have this pandemic. I'm not concerned for myself or my family. I am concerned, of course, of the way it's impacting people, of what could come of this. But as far as my health, I know how to stay well. So that has allowed me to be in the gray area, to think logically and not get attached to the fear. Does that mean I don't react to certain things? No, absolutely. I'm still human. But when I look at these posts that I've been seeing lately by MDs, doctors who are in the emergency room or whatever they're doing, no matter what medical profession they're in, they are very educated, very intelligent, very compassionate human beings. And they are putting these posts out of like F-bombs and this and shaming people and just the opposite of what you would think a doctor or a healer or caretaker would do. And my logical brain is like, how is this possible? And then, as you said, I think, okay, it's fear. They're feeling the fear plus the stress because they probably have the pressure to be the heroes in this situation. Plus they're in the hospitals having to do all these things different. They're still doing their job, but now with all these extra measures that have to be taken into place, they don't know what's going on. Like none of us really truly.
And of course, anxiety is contagious to the doctors and the nurses and everyone who works there. I mean, they're just seeing, my sister is a physical therapy assistant and works in a facility with people who are in rehab, recovering from all kinds of physical ailments. And it's just interesting to see how family members come in and they're really worried about the patient, of course, right? But the amount of emotional intensity and demands that is put on the facility actually ends if the workers don't know how to be able to walk away and take care of themselves emotionally and not absorb all of that, then it's going to show up on the social media. It's going to show up in their own families, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And again, and then it gets intensified. And then you have somebody with letters behind their name, whether it's us or a medical doctor, even more so, because they're directly in that medical field. And people look to you during fear as an authority and as, an authority figure and as a leader. And then you have them emoting and messy all over the place. It's like, whoa. And then that creates more fear, I feel like. And it's an interesting process. And I think what it also does for them, they have so much knowledge to share. Even us, we have so much knowledge to share. Anybody that's done this deep dive into this, any kind of healthcare field has so much knowledge to share right now. And it's really important for us to stay calm because now is our time to really have the podium and to make a difference. And they can't access that thinking brain or that knowledge if they're feeling all of that emotional pressure and emotional anxiety and not knowing how to deal with it. So this is, I think, another thing that I've been talking about with some of my colleagues is we get to see now who learned this stuff in their graduate program and who actually has been embodying it all of these years. Because if you have not been embodying it, you've just been learning the theory, you are going to be caught in fear now because you can't just automatically overnight start to develop this new skill. It takes a long time to stay on solid ground no matter what's going on around you.
And there's kind of there's two types of anxiety. There's chronic anxiety and acute anxiety. So acute anxiety is when there is currently a threat, right? So you're in a situation where it's a life or death situation and you need to make sure you survive. That's acute anxiety. Chronic anxiety is when our primitive brain is thinking constantly that there is a threat, right? It really believes that there is a threat. And with something like the coronavirus, it's really hard to tease apart where the acute anxiety and where the chronic anxiety are, right? Because it can be perceived as both.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just the unknowing. So we're constantly having to recalibrate each day. I was talking to someone today and I said, it's like every morning I wake up, I have no idea what day it is. I have to remind myself, I'm like, what happened yesterday? Like there's new news every day. There's new events, like drama, things happening. And there's days that I'm like tuned into it. I got the pulse on what's going on. And then there's other days I'm totally disconnected and I'm taking care of myself, walking on the beach or outside, taking a nap in the sun or whatever else, you know. But I feel like for me, I've been through so much transformation. My life has been in crisis so many times and I've navigated it. And each time I've navigated it, I've gotten stronger and I've gotten more solid. And the cell actually does that. The cell, you know, it gets these provocations, and every time, you know, it has a threat to that could threaten it, and it wins and it grows, it gets stronger for the next one, right? And so this is a lot of the skills that I teach is people to do this. But now that, you know, I've been through so many of these personal struggles, this is just the outer world kind of going through it, and I'm like, oh, interesting. Like it's not rattling me as much, but I'm still a part of the system. I'm still waking up, you know, I some nights having insomnia, some nights, you know, just like weird sleep patterns, these sorts of things. And I was saying to my friend earlier today, it's like every morning I have to do a little debriefing in my head of like, okay, today is Friday. You've got this going on. This happened yesterday, but like just losing track of time. And this is unlike anything I've ever experienced, because even though I've been through some traumatic experiences, it's never been on a global scale like this before.
No one has. No one
has. And it's,
no one who's alive.
Yeah, no one who's alive.
Spanish flu had as many parallels as anything else in modern history, right?
Yeah, and in the Holocaust and all these, and the World Wars, I suppose it has at least a global reach. And these
right, yeah.
But it's also, what's different from that is the Spanish flu, people could get sick in the morning and die by evening. And and with the Holocaust, you know, it's just like there's very immediate, clear and present dangers. And this is so weird because some of us know people who have been sick, but most of us are just, it's like, if you didn't watch the news, you would think nothing changed, you know, like it doesn't feel to be a threat. It's all I don't want to say it's imaginary, because it's not, it's real, but it's not so present and in your face in your day-to-day life unless you're tapping into the news or unless you're talking to people. And there's been new stuff coming out. Like I was really encouraged to see, and I know you and we both are sunbathers, and that was a big thing to have that little outdoor space when we lived together, and you made it all nice and pretty. And that is a healthy thing, to get that vitamin D. And there was a new study that just came out. I think it was from India that showed, I'll link it here when I post this so that I'm not misrepresenting it. But I think 99% of the COVID deaths, about 99%, were vitamin D deficient.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, how exciting is this to know that that is such an easy way to take care of ourselves, whether through the sun or supplementation.
Right.
But how can we do that if we can't get outside? You know, and how is this going to affect people of color more so because they have darker skin, and it takes them twice as long to absorb, you know, the vitamin D. Plus, not everybody has a patio or a yard or whatever else. So, you know, I think those are the cultural things that we have to look into. But yeah, there's just so much that we could go into systemically. And I have an idea of, I want to ask you about something else, unless there's anything else that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to bring up, because now that we've talked about the system and these provocations and, you know, this reaction, and kind of hopefully explain to our viewers why people are getting so reactive, what's causing that systemically as well as our own response.
Internal process, right?
Yeah, internal process. Now, I want to talk about the documentary Plandemic that came out and broke the internet yesterday. And we're recording this on Friday. What's the date? May 8th? May 8th. And it came out. It was being, every time it got posted on YouTube, it was being taken down for censorship or misinformation or whatever else. And then it started to get passed around privately through text message and whatever else, and it keeps popping up in different places, but you kind of have to know where to find it. And so, okay, regardless, even if you did not watch anything in the video, that just tells you something about an emotional process, right? Of like this kind of secret network of what's going on, and what that energy of suppression, like what causes us to want to make something go away, to suppress it, to not let it out. And why are people so reactive about it? Even just the name is a little bit, provoking. Not a little bit, it's a lot. The name is a lot provoking. I did watch the documentary. I do know people who know Dr. Judy and have worked with her and have vouched for her integrity and all of this. I don't know her personally, but I watch these things with an open mind. And I was not alarmed by anything that I saw in there, especially studying what I study in mind-body medicine, psychoneuroimmunology, all of these years. There wasn't anything that I felt would have been very reactionary, but all of a sudden it's this big thing. So I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And there's doctors that will not even review the documentary because they're automatically like, no.
What comes to mind, a few things, but one is fake news, right? Yeah. I mean, there's so much news, hardly any of it being objective.
Yes.
And hardly any of it being researched enough, or it's being skewed, that I think the majority of the population, they don't know what to think, and they want to. And then the other word that came to mind was homeostasis.
Yes.
Humans really don't like change. We don't, if the implications of this documentary is true, right? How much fear is that going to cause, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the two things that come to mind for me is, first of all, people don't know which way is up. So, their emotional state at that moment is going to cause them to react one way or another to something that is very big, right?
Yeah, and it is very big. She's being very bold about what she's saying. And two things that I noticed yesterday. One is the amount of pushback from people who aren't even invested in the story. They immediately like, don't show that, or take this down immediately, this control, like you do this, like almost as if like it's such an authority figure coming in and being like, shame on you, you do this. And that is just like, whoa, how did it have the power to turn somebody into a dictator, just a Facebook thread comment? So that's one thing. And then the next thing is I opened up my Apple News last night, and across almost every single platform there was a story about her. And then I opened up the first couple, and some of them I couldn't read. They were so biased. And I'm not even talking about like taking a side beyond my personal beliefs, because as we've already discussed, I'm a trained neutral researcher, and also as a therapist, you have to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. So I always try to do that as a practice. And it was really hard to read. The journalism was so biased and so poor. And it's interesting because it's really energized me to go back to my PhD, which I did this past week. I was on the leave of absence for a while, just to get really into academic writing again. I see how valuable and needed and important it is right now. And it's energized me to hopefully finish my PhD pretty soon, because it was a lot of intensity and work before. Now I see how needed it is. And so, yeah, understanding that, I can see why the public is confused, but how vitally important it is to take care of ourselves so that we can have that more objective thinking and digest things in an objective way, even if it seems crazy. We can.
And I'm sure that you've seen that most mental health suggestions include limiting yourself,
Yes.
to the news, to social media, to all of those things, because there is such a polarization going on and such a feeling of fear that it is contagious. It's going to affect you.
Yes.
And that's what I've done a lot of. I really have. I live in Santa Cruz, California. I go on the Santa Cruz county or city or county health website every day to see what the numbers are, to get the facts of COVID-19. You know, maybe I'll listen to a bit of news, my local news or whatever, of what's going on. Yeah. But really, the second anyone gets into these extreme viewpoints and what's going on, I ask myself, do I need to know this? Is it going to change what I'm doing? And is it going to cause some anxiety to where it isn't helpful to me or to the universe for me to put my anxiety out there with everyone else? So maybe I'm just going to shelter myself from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people say to me often, Natasha, you get involved in these debates, or you bring things up, and maybe you should just be quiet, and things like that. And I always tell people, I do, believe it or not, I consciously pick my battles. I avoid most of it, but I know I check in with myself before I dive in to something. And I usually dive in, and I'll be honest, sometimes it is an anxiety thing, like I'm feeling the anxiety and I get caught up.
You are human. I am human. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But a lot of times it's because I am a truth seeker and a truth speaker. And it relates to what you said before about the homeostasis, because in my own family, I was sexually abused as a child by my oldest stepbrother. And when I disclosed that information, after many years of keeping it a secret and being tortured by it, and it came out, that caused a huge ripple in the system. Mm-hmm. And there was pressure by some family members to shut up and not speak about it. And that was more traumatizing than the actual abuse, is being forced into secrecy after finally having the bravery to speak up and save myself. Ultimately, because, especially my parents, were, I think, handled it really well, especially considering, what they had going on and the amount of stress that they had in their life. And my mom was very much an advocate for me, of believing me and doing whatever she could to then keep me safe from there on. But the system did not change enough. And because of that, there were multiple future victims, because he did not get the consequences until much later. And he ended up getting accused of rape and going to jail, and finally got registered as a sex offender. But that was because somebody had the boldness to go through with the report despite the pressure to stay quiet and to keep the homeostasis and not rock the boat. And then there's a very large, probably majority of people that don't want to have anything to do with it at all. They're not going to say anything for or against. And that also keeps the homeostasis. And so for me, telling the truth set me free. It set me free from abuse. It's got me out of that situation of being manipulated, controlled. And so I always rely on the truth, sometimes to the extent where it does get me in trouble in some ways. And there's consequences to telling the truth. And so it is a mindful thing that I do, but it is an operating system that is very close to my integrity, my heart. And so when things happen like this, whether it's pandemic or a sexual abuse victim coming out and accusing a political figure or an athlete or whoever else of this, and the society immediately and starts to trash and discredit and discourage that person from speaking, or even giving them the microphone and taking a listen and holding multiple perspectives, I think systemically, wait a minute, what's going on? And how is this now going to contribute to continuing the cycle of abuse and secrecy, and then societal regression, as you're talking about?
Yeah, it is interesting, because Bowen theory always goes the way I think, and that is Bowen theory. It always comes back to one of his 8 concepts, differentiation of self. And differentiation of self is a process. It's not something that immediately happens. It can happen with any topic. And what it is it's a thoughtful process around what do I think about any particular thing, whether it's sexual abuse that occurred to you, in your family, in society, whether it's how do I parent, how do I handle my romantic relationship on this particular topic, right? So the definition of differentiation of self is being able to keep self and calmly state your opinion, regardless, in the face of anxiety, regardless of pressure that's being directed at you, right? Another piece of self, though, is when it gets to that societal level of all of these big news stories that have been going on, is really at least for me, because this is my own differentiation of self, is I need to come back to myself, and I need to try to understand if it did trigger something in me. Why did it trigger something in me? And I think this is what you're saying. Like, this is part of your process, right? But putting too much emphasis often on what's going on out here instead of what's going on in here is kind of, to me, a sign of anxiety. And, we can look at it in our culture, right? Our culture, or not just our culture, the world right now with social media and everything else. It's like, what's going on out there? We're not really even allowed to have our lives right now, right? So we have to look at what's going on out there. Whereas really, like the work that I've been doing with my clients right now over the telephone, because we can't do it in person, is them getting clear about their own emotional process and how to self-soothe, which is what I do work all the time with my clients on. But it's really clear at this moment that ultimately you have to come back to self, and ultimately we don't have a lot of control over what's going on at the societal level or even the family level, right? The only thing we can manage is ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think of, as I'm listening to you speak, I think of doctors, therapists, helping professions, advocates who go out there and want to save the world, right? And they forget to take care of themselves, and they forget to, and they're doing fine, and they don't even know to check in with themselves. And then
solutions come from an anxiety process, not okay, I have cared for myself first, and with some sort of calm and peace, I'm going to go out into the world and take care of whatever it is, right? Yeah. It's more like, put out fires, right? So put out fires is...
I have a funny example that just popped up in my head too, of, again, our older days. So when I first moved to San Diego, I had a new band that I was obsessed with and really interested in, and they were playing at the, what was it, Canes? Was it called Canes? Right in Beach. And I was like, Jillian, we have to go see this band. And I would have gone by myself, but I really wanted to go with somebody else, with you. And I went earlier that afternoon in my workout clothes to get tickets, and I had to run home and change. And I'm like, we got to be there at this time. And you're like, nope, I can't. I've got to do my kickboxing class. and I was like, Jillian, no, you got to see this band. But you held on to what was important to you, yourself. And I was then, I think I waited for you for a little bit, and then I was like, I got to go. And I'm standing in line, and and then you met me later, but sure enough, that band was Maroon 5.
Yep, it was.
And we ended up talking. I don't know if you were there, but I remember we were talking to the band later on that night after the show upstairs, and I knew. So we were both holding on to self, really, because your kickboxing class was really important to you, and I knew there was something special about this band, and the opportunity to see them on the ocean in San Diego in a small venue was like really exciting to me. Yeah. And sure enough, we managed to find a compromise there, where you got what you wanted and I got what I wanted. But if I had to rewind, I would go there sooner, so I could have not missed the very first part of that concert. But then, of course, I got to see them many other times as they made their tour around Southern California. But really just again, holding on and being able to assess what's important to you. And even if you, because I remember, if I think back, I was probably like a little bit irritated at you at the time, like, we gotta go, like, why?
You must have been. I don't even remember that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And I probably didn't even tell you. But I was feeling it, you know? But that's the thing, is we can get irritated with somebody who says like, oh no, I can only meet you at this time, or no, I have that going on. And you're like, ah, and you get irritated. But really, I always step back and I'm like, oh, you have respect for that person, because you realize they're taking care of themselves. And the same goes for us who are caretakers. When we take care of ourselves, we are actually demonstrating a self-respect, and we are modeling for other people as well how to respect themselves and stay healthy.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it gets more challenging every day as this thing goes on. I was mentioning earlier, you know, in systems, at the science level and every level, there's the concept of an open system and a closed system. Certainly in relationship systems, an open system is healthier, where there's no threat when people come and go, right? In a closed system where people can't come and go, the anxiety only, you know, circulates within. It bounces kind of off the walls, as many of us can feel with my friends posting about their children and what's going on and trying to homeschool them and all that stuff. You know, it can only bounce off the walls. And so this, you know, we were talking about the implications of if this goes on for 2 or 3 years. And, you know, it is really important. I've been doing a lot of Zoom things, not just with, you know, you, Natasha, but with my friends and my family, making sure that I do keep as much social contact with people as possible, because if we don't do that, it turns into a closed system. And that's just, it's a pressure cooker. Where does the anxiety go? Where do we get our connectedness needs met if we're not reaching out in a two-way thing versus social media or just watching whatever's coming in at us?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, because it could definitely veer into a whole nother episode. But as you're talking about closed systems, of course, I think about romantic dynamics and monogamy versus polyamory. And I've always thought that, you know, polyamory, if you look at it just from a scientific viewpoint, you know, it's a triangle or several triangles, and it's less of a closed system. And I believe that there's a healthy way to do it, or an unhealthy way to do it. Same with monogamy, a healthy way to do it, an unhealthy way to do it. But have you, what are your thoughts on monogamy?
Well, I think about the whole idea of humans, of binding anxiety. Binding anxiety kind of keeps the anxiety in versus kind of working through the anxiety, right? And one of Bowen's other concepts is triangles, which a 3-person relationship system is the most stable relationship system. A 2-person relationship system isn't very stable. It's like a 3-legged stool versus a 2-legged stool. 2-legged stools don't work. They just fall right over. Same idea. It depends on how an individual uses that, whether you're talking about sex, whether you're talking about polyamorous, and it doesn't even, it applies to whether it's a sexual relationship or a non-sexual relationship. It's the same thing. If you're, and we all do this. No one, I mean, I do it. We all do it. I'm aware when I do it. Not sexually, of course, but just if you are attempting to connect with someone else in order to avoid going towards the anxiety in another relationship, then it is binding anxiety, and whatever. All humans do it, right? Versus, you know, Bowen theory is all about going towards the anxiety, working through the anxiety. If you work through the anxiety and your decision is still to have a polyamorous relationship and both people agree, then sure, right? It really just depends on how it's being used and how people are mindful of it or not.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. And I always appreciate being in relationship with people, again, like you said, whether it's colleagues, romance, friendship, that are willing to sit with the anxiety or to move toward the anxiety. Like that is a defining characteristic in a relationship that I look for. And of course, something that I appreciate that you and I have been able to maintain, you know, a friendship throughout the years.
Yeah.
And even you have a very strong personality. I have a very strong personality.
Yep.
And we can clash at times because of that. And yet we are able to maintain a beautiful relationship because, you know, falling back on the self-awareness and these principles.
And the respect, the mutual respect. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? I mean, getting rid of all those other words, you know, it's like, well, and I mean, part of having differentiation of self is I don't need you to be me. That would be pretty boring if everyone was like me, right? And what about difference makes someone afraid, right? Why should I pressure you to be like me?
Exactly. And I think if we had to, you know, wrap this up and give people a couple takeaways, I think that is one, is start examining how you are pressuring somebody else to be like you, whether it's, you know, the pressuring or shaming somebody, you know, to wear a mask. I was just talking about the mask thing is to me, it's not that big of it's not a big issue, but it is a big issue because of the social media
people
stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is a big issue. My doctors told me not to wear a mask. I fainted in January, and so anything that would in any way restrict oxygen, he's saying don't do it, but I look completely healthy. And so if I walk into a grocery store now, people are going to assume I'm an asshole because, you know, I'm not wearing a mask. But the fear, there's a little bit of fear there of the last time that I went down and hit my head. And
oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago. It was in January, you know, and it had to do with stress and adrenal fatigue creating low blood pressure and less oxygen going to my brain. So of course I meditate, of course I eat really healthy, I do all these things, but I'm also always looking at maximum oxygen intake. And so wearing something like that, especially as the weather heats up, it makes me think about the time that I went down and I went unconscious, and I had two men like pulling me out of the room, and I had no idea what was going on, and that was scary in and of itself, you know.
Yes.
And so when people are shaming me or pressuring me to wear a mask because they have these assumptions, I think we always have to realize that not everybody is us. They have their own set of circumstances that is informing their choices, and they have their own things that they're dealing with. And it's okay to trust people and have that mutual respect, as you're talking about, to know what to do to best take care of themselves in that moment or their families. And if we could examine that more, whether again it's the mask or what we eat or vaccinations or how much time you want to spend outside, or if you want to wear sunscreen or not, or, you know, all of these things, what can we allow people to have a different perspective and a different body and a different biology and a different emotional brain?
Yes. It is very interesting.
Yeah.
For sure.
So what other takeaways do you think would be important that people could actually use?
I hate to say, what time is it? Is it 5:30 or 5?
4:24. It's my birthday.
I'm sorry. Okay, we're good.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll wrap this up too. But any other takeaways that you think would be important for people to keep in mind? So we talked about the neutrality, trying to stay neutral, self-care.
I think that's really important. Whenever I am struggling with remaining neutral, whether it's about a client, a friend, my boyfriend, my parents, I come back to myself and say, what is it about this situation? It has to do with my primitive brain, right? Could be that it was just triggered a familiar dynamic from my past. You know, it could be many things, but that's what I do. I come back to myself, and, you know, I try to say as little as possible about whatever it is until I find some clarity. And depending on the topic, that can take days, right? I mean,
in my case, years. Sometimes.
Well, I mean, it depends. Right.
Yeah,
It just really depends on what it is. But, you know, I really, you know, so just trying to take responsibility and acknowledging that I'm human and that, you know, I do and say things that aren't necessarily helpful all the time, because guess what? We all have more anxiety. It's, you know, no one is immune to it unless you're in an inanimate object,
Yeah.
I notice the animals. I notice my family dog. I notice, everyone is affected by this.
Yeah. And I really like what you said about holding on to something until you're clear about it. Saying as little as possible until you're clear. Because I think that's one of the things that has happened. I'll just say it, during this administration, during this presidency, we have a president that doesn't think before he has no filter. And people confuse honesty with no filter. Those are two different things. And when you have no filter and you say the first thing that comes up, or you say something that's intentionally reactionary to stir up some drama, or to stir up a reaction or attention or a news story or whatever else, that also is contagious to the whole system. And people start to subconsciously behave that way without even realizing it until they catch themselves doing it. And then now we have this like pervasive system of that happening. So the antidote truly is for each one of us, not for us to tell other people to shut up, but for us to go in and say, oh, when can we not say the first thing that comes up and be
that's a mindful process. And it's a process. None of us are always totally successful at doing that. It takes practice. It takes not shaming ourselves when we don't behave or when we say something that isn't helpful. It's not about a shame process. It's about a thoughtful, more objective process, even about ourselves, to say, well, that didn't go well. Is there anything I can do next time when a similar situation comes up that might be more helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Because not only that helps you in the moment, we're talking about short-term and long-term, but it does, it helps the system, because the more drama that's stirred up, the more stress, the more energy, whatever words you want to use for that, it weakens the immune system. And that's
yes.
And that's why Bowen, I think, also looks at medical disorders in that family diagram, and see certain medical disorders pop up, and you can predict them through the generations, not necessarily because of the genes or the DNA, but because of the stress and the emotional process. And so if we're living at a time when everybody's they're letting, have verbal diarrhea and things flying out, and that's amping up the stress, it is decreasing our immune system. And it is not surprising to me that after 4 years of this, I don't want to say that it's all, this administration, because it's happened before, anytime you have polarization or whatever else, but it's been at a very extreme level, extreme energy meter.
I think Kennedy was the last president we had that actually had any real pull around anything. I really do. I think it's become so polarized and so political. It's been since before I was born and you were born. Yeah.
There you go. And I'm saying this too without taking a political position, because I know that just based on my comments, people are going to assume, they probably, when I first started talking, they're like, oh, this is right-wing propaganda. Now they're probably like, oh, she's a liberal, crazy person, snowflake.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you're trying to be objective. You're going to be accused of something if you're trying to be objective.
Yeah, but I don't claim a political party. I don't want to be labeled as political. This has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with noticing the patterns and noticing the facts. And anxiety and stress absolutely is the biggest assault to our immune system. And so if we are continuing that, so it does not surprise me that we are dealing with a pandemic right now where everybody's immune system is weakened. And what can we do? Again, self-care, to not control the environment, not try to control every virus or bacteria or microbe or whatever else around us, because it's impossible to do that. But how can we strengthen ourselves emotionally through our relationships, through the foods we eat, through our self-care practices, the exercise, the supplements we take, all of these things. There's so much that we can be doing to take our power back and stay sovereign beings in this crisis. And so I want to leave people with that. And also, I don't know, maybe this is for another episode, but I was really interested in what you said about power, power dynamics, and how do we, and maybe there's something that you have that you can share, that how do we manage ourselves in the face of power that is so big and so oppressive in the system that as one person, it feels like we can't.
I come back to something I've said a lot over the years with my clients. what is the difference between, well, I will say there's a big difference between letting go and giving up. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much we can't do, we can't control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to let go of those things. Otherwise, they will cause stress,
mm-hmm.
anxiety, right? But how is that? But it comes from the same part of the brain. It comes from the emotional part of the brain. Being able to let go
mm-hmm.
and giving up are both the same thing. So what's the difference? And I think we all need to grapple with what that difference is for us individually. What is the difference?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm pretty clear about it, you know. I think at times we all kind of want to give up, right? Well, that's not helpful, but letting go is helpful.
Yeah, and I think as I'm listening to you, I have this imagery in my mind of like one person, the squeaky wheel, right? That can create change sometimes, but it can also create anxiety and whatever.
Intense anxiety.
And I think about like social justice advocates, which I am one. I'm always going to be a social advocate. I think it's part of our profession. I think we're trained that that's an important part of our profession, is to protect our clients, protect the underserved or whatever else. So I will be part of that, but I'm not a marcher. I'm not somebody who's going to exhaust myself to fight for a cause. It doesn't make sense to me, but there are some people that feel like that amount of energy or passion, they're going to throw it out there. But actually, if you look at the bigger system, what would happen to create change much quicker is if we all at the same time took little baby steps each day to do what you're saying, is let go of what we can't control and just keep focusing little by little.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean we can't calmly state what it is we think.
Yep.
Letting go does not mean that we can't calmly state in whatever, if we're saying it to our significant other or if we're saying it to the world, it doesn't mean we have to stop saying what we think. It just means, where is that coming from emotionally? What space inside of you is that coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, move towards the anxiety, let go, but also move towards the anxiety. What does that mean? What is that? And I like the word that you use, which is grapple, because it is kind of, it's a grappling with ourselves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do we...
Ultimately, any of our relationships is about our relationship with ourselves.
Yes. And when people first get introduced to this concept, they confuse it with being selfish or narcissistic.
Yes, right.
And that's all-time, that topic is a whole big...
Yeah, and that is such an interesting topic that I have so many conversations about, because people are polarized. They're either very selfish or they're very selfless, right?
Yep.
And what does the middle ground look like? I know what it looks like for me. I was the selfish one in my family. That was my label. I was the younger sibling and the selfish one. And after working really hard and realizing that, okay, I kind of was, and I was in a family with no boundaries. So like I was the only person who was taking any boundary, right? So that could be called selfish. And then once I was able to let go of that and not be negative about myself, what do you know? I became less selfish. But that was a process of me understanding and knowing myself and not feeling badly about the label that got put on me and my family, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So if we want to understand another person, we have to know ourselves really well. If we want to change another person or a relationship or a society, we need to change ourselves. Absolutely.
That's the only thing we can change.
That's the only thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was probably the most valuable, if I did put it in one word, one sentence, the most valuable thing from our master's degree was that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, I think it's a good time to wrap it up. This has been so much fun, and oh my gosh, there's so many other ways that we could go with this. So I really, I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, we should. We should do it at least while we're doing this sheltered in place, for sure.
It gives us a little extra time. No travel time means more YouTube time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, well, where can people find you? Are you accepting new clients? Are you doing any kind of...
I am. If they Google my name, Jillian Chesley, or maybe you could put
it in the caption
on the YouTube. Yes, I have a website, and yeah, I'm accepting new clients. I am just doing phone sessions right now, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So I'll link that in the comments, and then anybody who watches me regularly knows that I do on Tuesdays and Fridays at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time a bedtime meditation that broadcasts simultaneously from Instagram Live and Facebook Live. So that'll be happening. I won't post this tonight, but tonight's Friday, so it'll be happening tonight. On Sunday, I have an offering, a little Zoom call for anybody that wants to discuss more of the data and the research and some of the stuff that's the numbers that are coming out with COVID, and feel more empowered with how to interpret that. I've got that happening on Sunday that you can join in. And please, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share and pass it along. And we hope to keep bringing you really awesome content that, you know, maybe you're not seeing anywhere else on the internet. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Jillian. Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Natasha.
And we will see you all again soon.